I never thought I'd be the woman telling this story, the one who destroys her marriage over one stupid night and then watches helplessly as her husband transforms into someone who could clearly do better. But here I am, Paisley Dunn, 31 years old, sitting in what used to be our living room, wondering how I became the cautionary tale I used to judge other women for. My husband, Oliver, isn't leaving me, not exactly, but he's becoming someone else entirely. Someone who makes me feel like I should be grateful he even looks in my direction. And the worst part? I have absolutely no one to blame but myself. It started with my sister Chloe's bachelorette weekend in Charleston. I almost didn't go. Oliver and I had been trying to save money for a house down payment, and the trip wasn't exactly in our budget. But Chloe guilt-tripped me hard. "You're my only sister, Paisley. I need you there." Oliver encouraged me to go, even offered to pick up extra shifts at the fire department to cover the cost. "You deserve a fun weekend with your sister," he said, kissing my forehead in that way that always made me feel completely loved. "Just promise me you'll be careful." I should have listened to that warning tone in his voice. I should have recognized that he was worried about more than just my safety. The first 2 nights were perfectly innocent. Spa treatments, nice dinners, lots of wine, but nothing crazy. It was Sunday afternoon when everything went sideways. Chloe had the brilliant idea to hit this trendy rooftop bar before our flight home Monday morning. "One last hurrah," she declared. The place was packed with gorgeous people in expensive clothes, and the drinks were strong, really strong. I remember thinking I felt more attractive than I had in months, wearing this emerald green dress I'd bought specifically for the trip. Oliver had whistled when he saw me pack it, saying it made my eyes look incredible. That's when I met him, this investment banker from Atlanta with expensive watch and a smile that reminded me of the guys I used to date in college, before Oliver, before I settled down and got serious about life. His name was Luke, and he bought our entire group drinks, charming my sister and her friends effortlessly. But he kept coming back to me, complimenting my dress, asking about my life back home. When he found out I was married, he didn't back off. If anything, it seemed to intrigue him more. "Lucky guy," he said, his hand briefly touching my lower back as he guided me toward the bar. "Does he know how stunning his wife is?" I should have walked away right then. Instead, I felt this rush of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. When was the last time someone flirted with me like this? When was the last time I felt desired by someone new? Oliver and I had been together since college. 8 years total, married for 3. Our relationship was comfortable, stable, loving. But comfortable doesn't make your heart race. Stable doesn't make you feel like the most beautiful woman in the room. I kept drinking. Luke kept buying. My sister and her friends eventually moved to another part of the bar, but I stayed with him, laughing at his stories about client dinners and business trips. He made my life as a graphic designer at a small marketing firm sound boring by comparison. "You're too interesting to be stuck in some small town," he said, leaning closer. "Someone like you should be in a bigger city, bigger opportunities." The compliment felt like a drug. Here was this successful, worldly man telling me I was special, that I deserved more than what I had. Never mind that what I had was a loving husband who worked dangerous shifts to keep people safe, who brought me coffee in bed every Sunday morning, who still held my hand when we walked anywhere. By the time Luke suggested we get some air on the terrace, I was drunk enough to think it was a great idea. The Charleston skyline looked magical in the evening light, and when he kissed me, I didn't stop him. I didn't stop him when his hands wandered either, or when he suggested we go somewhere more private. The entire elevator ride to his hotel room, I kept telling myself I was just being adventurous, just having fun. This wasn't real. It was like a brief escape from my regular life. I woke up the next morning in his bed, still wearing the green dress but nothing else, with the worst hangover of my life and a sick realization of what I'd done. Luke was already up showering, acting like nothing significant had happened. "Thanks for last night," he said casually when he emerged with a towel around his waist. "Hope you have a safe flight home." That's when it hit me. I was just another conquest to him. A married woman from a small town who got drunk and made bad decisions. I grabbed my shoes and purse and practically ran from that room, shame washing over me in waves. I made it back to my hotel room before Chloe woke up, showered off any evidence, and spent the flight home crafting my story. I'd tell Oliver we stayed out too late, that I was hungover, that nothing interesting happened. Simple. For the first few weeks, I almost convinced myself it had worked. Oliver seemed normal, happy to have me home, interested in hearing about the trip, affectionate as always. I threw myself into being the perfect wife to compensate for my guilt. I cooked his favorite meals, surprised him with tickets to baseball games, initiated intimacy more often than usual. "Someone's in a good mood lately," he said one evening after I'd made his favorite lasagna for no particular reason. "I like this version of you." The comment stung because it implied I hadn't been this attentive before Charleston, which was probably true. I'd gotten comfortable in our relationship, maybe a little lazy. I stopped making an effort with my appearance, stopped planning surprise dates, stopped trying to impress him the way I did when we were dating. But that was normal, right? That's what happened in long-term relationships. You relaxed, got comfortable. Except now I realized how much I'd been taking Oliver for granted, and it took cheating on him to see it. 6 weeks after Charleston, Oliver asked me to meet him for lunch on a Saturday. Not unusual, we sometimes met downtown when he finished a shift. But something in his voice was different, careful, controlled. I found him at our usual cafe, but he wasn't sitting at our regular table by the window. He'd chosen a corner booth, away from other people. When I slid in across from him, his expression was unreadable. "How was Charleston?" he asked quietly. Confused, I launched into my practice story about spa treatments and sisterly bonding, but Oliver just watched me with these steady eyes, not interrupting, not nodding along like he usually did. When I finished, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. "Chloe posted some pictures from the trip that I missed before. Want to see?" My stomach dropped, but I nodded. He scrolled to a photo from the rooftop bar, me in the green dress, leaning against Luke at the bar, his arm around my waist. We looked intimate, cozy, like a couple. "Who's this?" Oliver asked, his voice still calm. I could have lied. I should have lied. Instead, I crumbled completely. "It's not what it looks like," I started, but Oliver held up a hand. "Chloe called me this morning. She felt guilty about not saying anything sooner. She told me you disappeared with this guy for hours, that you came back to the hotel the next morning in the same dress." The entire story spilled out of me. The drinks, the flirting, the hotel room. I was sobbing by the end, mascara probably streaking down my face, reaching across the table for his hands. He pulled them away. "Please," I begged. "It didn't mean anything. I was drunk. I made a horrible mistake." Oliver was quiet for a long time, staring at the table between us. When he finally looked up, his expression was different. Not angry, that would have been easier. He looked disappointed, tired. "I need some time to think," he said, standing up. "I'll stay at the firehouse for a few days." "Oliver, please, don't call me, don't text me. I need space to figure this out." He left money on the table and walked out, leaving me sobbing in a corner booth at our favorite cafe. Oliver stayed away for 5 days, 5 of the longest days of my life. I called in sick to work, barely ate, and spent most of my time on the couch replaying every moment of our relationship, wondering if I just destroyed the best thing in my life over one night of stupidity. When he finally came home, he looked different somehow. Older, more serious. He sat down across from me in our living room and laid out his terms. "If we're going to try to work through this, here's what needs to happen. Complete honesty about everything from now on. No more girls' trips without me knowing exactly who you're with and where you're going. And I need you to cut way back on drinking." I agreed immediately to everything. I would have agreed to anything to keep him. "This isn't punishment," he continued. "It's about rebuilding trust. But Paisley, if anything like this ever happens again, we're done. No discussion, no second chances. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. It won't. I swear it won't. I hope not, he said quietly, because I don't think I could survive it a second time. That night, we held each other in bed without talking. I thought maybe we could get through this, that we'd be stronger on the other side. I had no idea that Oliver was already planning a completely different future. The changes started subtly about a month after our reconciliation. Oliver had always been fit. His job required it, but he'd never been obsessive about it. Suddenly, he was at the gym every day before his shifts, sometimes after too. He started meal prepping elaborate high-protein lunches, reading fitness magazines, tracking his workouts in a detailed journal. Just trying to get back in shape, he said when I commented on his new routine. Feeling better about myself? Within 3 months, the difference was dramatic. Oliver had always been attractive, tall and lean with dark hair and these incredible blue eyes that first caught my attention in college. But now his arms filled out his t-shirts differently, his shoulders looked broader, his entire presence more commanding. Other women noticed too. At the grocery store, at church, even at the gas station, I watched female eyes track my husband as he moved through the world with this new confidence. And I couldn't blame them. If I weren't married to him, I'd be staring too. "You look amazing," I told him one evening after he'd gotten home from the gym. I tried to make it flirty, running my hands over his chest. "All this working out is really paying off." "Thanks," he said, but he stepped away from my touch to grab a protein shake from the fridge. No lingering touch, no suggestion that we take this to the bedroom like there might have been before. Sex had become infrequent and mechanical since Charleston. When it happened, it felt like Oliver was going through the motions rather than actually wanting me. I tried everything: new lingerie, romantic dinners, surprising him when he got home from work. But nothing seemed to reignite that spark we used to have. "Is everything okay?" I asked one night after a particularly disconnected encounter. "Between us, I mean?" "Everything's fine," he said, already rolling over to his side of the bed. "Just tired." But it wasn't fine. Something fundamental had shifted in how Oliver saw me, and I was terrified it might never shift back. Around the same time as the fitness obsession, Oliver became laser-focused on advancing his career. He'd always been a good firefighter, but suddenly he was studying for every promotion exam, volunteering for extra training, taking leadership courses online. "I want to make captain before I'm 35, he told me one evening, surrounded by textbooks and practice tests. Maybe chief eventually. This was news to me. We'd never talked about him wanting to climb the ranks. I'd always assumed he was happy being a regular firefighter, serving the community without the administrative headaches of leadership. "Since when do you want to be captain?" I asked. He looked at me with a slightly puzzled expression. "Since always? I guess I just never talked about it because I wasn't serious about making it happen. Now I am." The studying took up most of his free time. Evenings that used to be spent watching movies together or going for walks were now spent with him hunched over books while I sat alone on the couch. Weekends became study sessions and networking events with other firefighters looking to advance. "Want to come to the department barbecue Saturday?" I asked hopefully. We used to love those events: good food, friendly people, a chance to socialize together. "You'd be bored," Oliver said, without looking up from his emergency management textbook. "It's mostly going to be shop talk about procedures and protocols." Since when did Oliver think I'd be bored by his work? I'd always been interested in what he did, proud of his service, happy to chat with his colleagues and their wives. Now he was treating me like some fragile flower who couldn't handle real conversation. I went alone and felt completely out of place. Everyone asked where Oliver was, and I had to explain that he was home studying. Their sympathetic looks made it clear they thought he was avoiding me rather than prioritizing his career. The most painful change was how Oliver started navigating our social life. We used to do everything together: dinner with friends, family gatherings, community events. Now he increasingly went places alone or made excuses for why I couldn't join him. "Team building exercise at the rock climbing gym," he'd say, heading out on a Saturday afternoon. Just department guys. Or study group meeting at Jake's house. We'll probably go late, and you have to work tomorrow. These explanations were perfectly reasonable, but they represented a complete shift from the man who used to want me by his side everywhere he went. Oliver was building a life separate from me, and he seemed perfectly happy with that arrangement. When I did accompany him to events, I felt like a third wheel. He'd spend the evening talking shop with other firefighters while I sat with the wives, feeling disconnected from conversations about children, home renovations, or career achievements. "Oliver's really going places," one of the captain's wives said to me at a retirement party. "My husband says he's the most dedicated guy they've seen in years." "Yeah, he's been studying a lot," I replied, watching my husband across the room deep in conversation with the fire chief. He looked confident, professional, completely in his element, and completely uninterested in including me in any of it. That night on the drive home, I tried to bring it up. "You seem really comfortable with all the department politics now. It's important to understand how things work if you want to advance," he said, eyes on the road. "I should have been paying attention to this stuff years ago. We used to talk about this kind of thing together. Now I feel like I'm hearing about your goals secondhand." Oliver was quiet for a moment. "I guess I just realized I need to take ownership of my own career instead of expecting you to be interested in every detail." The comment stung because it implied I hadn't been supportive of his ambitions. But how could I be supportive of goals he'd never shared with me? By month 6 post-Charleston, Oliver felt like a stranger living in our apartment. He was polite, responsible, perfectly civil. He paid his share of bills, did his household chores, remembered my birthday with a nice gift. But the intimacy, emotional and physical, had almost completely disappeared. We stopped sharing details about our days. When I tried to tell him about problems at work or drama with my friends, he'd listen with this polite attention that felt worse than if he'd ignored me completely. Like he was humoring me. "Maybe we should go to counseling," I suggested one evening after another dinner eaten in virtual silence. Oliver looked up from his phone, where he'd been reading something about fire science. "Do you think we need counseling?" The question confused me. "Don't you?" "I don't know. Do you feel like we have communication problems?" It was such a strange response. Of course we had communication problems. We barely communicated at all anymore. But the way he asked made me feel like I was being dramatic, like maybe the problem was my perception rather than our actual relationship. "Never mind," I said, and he went back to his phone. Later, lying in bed while Oliver slept peacefully beside me, I wondered if this was just what marriage looked like after a betrayal. Maybe this was the price of staying together, a relationship that functioned but no longer thrived. Maybe I should be grateful he hadn't left instead of mourning what we'd lost. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Oliver wasn't just staying with me. He was actively preparing for a life without me. Everything came into sharp focus at the annual Firefighters Association dinner 8 months after Charleston. It was a formal event, and I'd bought a new dress, hoping maybe we could have one evening that felt like old times. Oliver looked incredible in his dress uniform. The fitness regime had transformed his physique, and the confidence he'd developed over the past months made him carry himself differently. Walking into that hotel ballroom with him, I felt proud to be his wife. For about 10 minutes, then I watched other women react to him. Wives of other firefighters, single women who worked for the city, even some of the female firefighters from other departments, they all lit up when Oliver approached their conversations. Not just polite professional interest, but genuine attraction. "Oliver, you look amazing," gushed the mayor's assistant, a pretty blonde who couldn't have been older than 25. "Have you been working out?" "A little," Oliver said, with a modest smile that I hadn't seen directed at me in months. "Just trying to stay in shape for the job." She laughed like this was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. "Well, it's definitely working. You should give my boyfriend some tips." I watched this interaction from a few feet away, holding 2 glasses of wine, realizing that my husband was now the kind of man other women flirted with openly. And more troubling, he wasn't exactly discouraging it. Throughout the evening, it was the same pattern. Women found excuses to touch his arm while talking, to compliment his appearance, to mention how impressive his recent test scores had been. Oliver accepted these interactions graciously, charmingly, like he'd been training for this kind of attention his whole life. When the dancing started, at least 3 different women asked him to dance before I could. He was polite but declined, claiming he wanted to spend time with me, but when we did dance, it felt obligation rather than desire. "Everyone seems impressed with your progress," I said, as we swayed to some generic wedding-style music. "It's nice to feel appreciated for working hard," he replied, not really looking at me. "Do I not appreciate you?" Finally, his eyes met mine. "You appreciate the old version of me, the guy who was content to stay in the same position forever, who didn't have any big ambitions." "That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you asked about my studies, or my goals for making captain, or how I feel about the changes I've been making?" I stood there on the dance floor, realizing he was right. I'd been so focused on trying to get back to our old dynamic that I'd completely ignored the person he was becoming. "You're different," I said softly. "Yeah, I am. The question is whether you can love this version of me, or if you'll always be trying to get back to who I used to be." I didn't have an answer for that. Last month, Oliver made captain. At 33, he was one of the youngest in the department's history. The promotion came with a significant raise, more responsibility, and a level of respect that transformed how people interacted with him. The celebration party was held at a nice restaurant downtown, and everyone was there: department brass, city officials, family, and friends. Oliver gave a speech about dedication and hard work that had everyone nodding along admiringly. He looked confident, successful, completely in command of the room. I sat at our table watching him, feeling like I was observing a stranger. This wasn't the quiet, steady man I'd married. This was someone who commanded attention, who set ambitious goals and achieved them, who carried himself like he knew exactly what he was worth. During his speech, he thanked various people who had supported his journey: his parents, his mentors at the department, his study group partners. He thanked me too, but it felt perfunctory, like an afterthought. After the party, we drove home in comfortable silence. Oliver seemed energized by the evening, more animated than I'd seen him in months. "Captain Mitchell thinks I should consider going for battalion chief in a few years," he said, loosening his tie. "It would mean more administrative work, but the leadership experience would be incredible." "That sounds amazing," I said, meaning it. "You've worked so hard for this." He glanced over at me, something unreadable in his expression. "Have you thought about what you want to do with your career, now that things are more stable for us financially?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've been at the same graphic design job for 5 years. Don't you want something bigger, more challenging?" It was such an Oliver question, practical, forward-thinking, focused on improvement. But it also felt like criticism, like my contentment with my current position was somehow insufficient. "I like my job," I said defensively. "I know you do, but is liking it enough? Don't you want to love what you do? Don't you want to feel proud of what you're building?" The conversation felt loaded, like we were talking about more than just careers. When we got home, Oliver poured himself a glass of wine and sat down at our kitchen table. "I need to tell you something," he said, and my heart immediately started racing. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately, about our future." Here it comes, I thought. He's going to ask for a divorce. "I don't think we want the same things anymore," he continued. "And I don't think that's anyone's fault. People grow in different directions sometimes." "What are you saying?" Oliver took a long sip of wine before answering. "I'm saying that the man I am now, the man I'm becoming, needs a partner who's growing too. Someone who's building something significant with their life. And you don't think I'm doing that? I think you're comfortable. And there's nothing wrong with comfortable, but it's not what I need anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. "So this is about Charleston?" "You're punishing me." "This isn't about Charleston," Oliver interrupted. "Charleston was a symptom, not the cause. It showed me that we'd both gotten complacent in different ways. You sought excitement outside our marriage, and I had stopped challenging myself to be worthy of someone seeking excitement. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. The difference is, I used that realization to change. You've spent the past year trying to get back to the way things were. Because the way things were was good, I protested. We were happy. Were we, or were we just comfortable? Oliver leaned back in his chair, studying me. When was the last time you felt proud of something you'd accomplished? When was the last time you set a goal that scared you and then worked to achieve it? I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. I love you, Paisley. I probably always will. But I need a partner who's building something meaningful with their life, not just coasting through it. So where does that leave us? Oliver was quiet for a long moment. I think it leaves us needing to decide if we can grow together or if we've grown apart. That conversation was 3 weeks ago, and I've been thinking about it constantly. About the man Oliver has become and the woman I've remained. About the goals he's achieved and the complacency I've embraced. About the energy he radiates and the emptiness I've been carrying. He's right about everything, and that's the hardest part to accept. I did cheat in Charleston, partly because I was bored, partly because I felt invisible in my own life. I married Oliver when we were both content to live small, comfortable lives. But he's outgrown that version of himself, and I'm still there. Yesterday, I found myself Googling graphic design programs at the local university. Not because Oliver suggested it, but because his question about loving what I do has been haunting me. Do I love my work? Do I feel proud of what I'm building? The honest answer is no. I've been sleepwalking through my career the same way I was sleepwalking through my marriage before Charleston. The difference is, Oliver woke up from that sleepwalk, and I'm still in it. I don't know if our marriage will survive this period of growth and change. Maybe the person I become will be compatible with the person he's becoming. Or maybe we're destined to grow in different directions. But I finally understand that trying to get back to who we used to be isn't the answer. Oliver deserves a partner who matches his ambition, his energy, his commitment to building something meaningful. And I deserve to discover who I could become if I stopped settling for comfortable. Charleston didn't just cost me my husband's trust. It revealed how little I valued myself. Now I need to figure out if it's too late to change that, or if the woman I could become is worth fighting for. Either way, I can't keep being the person who cheated at a bachelorette party and then spent a year wondering why her husband started acting like he was out of her league. Maybe he is out of my league, but maybe, if I'm brave enough to try, I can level up to meet him there.